Thank you to everyone who is taking the time to join us here tonight. I'm Shauna, the Member Services Coordinator at the OAVT, and I'm happy to be hosting tonight's presentation. This week is actually National Mental Health Awareness Week here in Canada, and I think we all recognize that mental health is a critical issue in veterinary medicine. And as your professional association, we think it's important to have honest conversations about the struggles that people in the industry will probably face at some point in their career. I'll be joined tonight by some lovely individuals who will be sharing some personal stories with you, and will also provide you with helpful resources to support your well-being. These individuals are going to share some insights into how the veterinary industry has been trying to better support the overall well-being of people working in animal health, and they'll also be sharing their own experiences with how mental health has personally touched their lives. So I'm excited to have three people who will be joining me tonight. They're going to share some insights into how veterinary industry has been trying to better support the overall well-being of people working in animal health. And they'll also be sharing their own experiences with how mental health has personally touched their lives. We want this to be an honest and supportive conversation for everyone. To begin, I'd like to introduce Angie Aurora. So Angie is a veterinary social worker as well, who is highly regarded for her commitment to supporting the well-being of veterinary professionals and for her deep understanding of the challenges they face. She has also been a great supporter of our association over the years and has presented at various OAVT events. She'll spend about 15 minutes sharing her observations related to mental health and well-being in veterinary medicine, and will also be available to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us, Angie.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for the introduction. So we have some incredible stories to hear tonight, and my stuff is probably stuff you've heard before. So I'm going to try to move quickly so we've got lots of space to hear from the others that are joining. So for those of you perhaps that have not heard my content or heard me speak, as Shauna mentioned, go back there for a moment, I am a social worker and I specialize in helping to mitigate the impacts of workplace stress and trauma exposure, specifically within animal healthcare organizations. So what I'm going to share over the next 10 to 15 minutes, as Shauna mentioned, are simply my observations. It is okay if these observations don't land with your experiences. I'm simply sharing what I've seen. Frontline, speaking with many, many professionals every month for the last several years. What I want to start with is just a little bit of terminology, because I do believe that when we're talking about mental health in vet med, the framing that we use matters a lot, not only to help us understand what might be happening, but just as importantly, where do we go from here? Because if we don't have, in my books, the accurate framing, it becomes really hard to know what we're actually trying to address. And so the language that I'm going to use is around mental health and professional well-being. Highly connected, but also a little bit different. And so this is just a definition that I've created. By no stretch of the imagination is it meant to be fully exhaustive. But what I've come to learn is that when we're using the language of mental health, what we're really talking about is a state of inner well-being, really simply put, how we think, how we feel, and how we cope with life. And of course, even according to the World Health Organization, mental health is impacted by so many broad factors, societal factors, our upbringing, and of course, our workplace environments. So when we're talking about mental health in veterinary medicine, I think it's just really important to pause and acknowledge that for every single person that's joining in and listening tonight or to the recording, our mental health is impacted by personal factors and workplace and professional factors. And so it's not about one being more important than the other. They kind of collide, so to speak, and impact how we maneuver through our days and through life. And in my next few slides, I'm going to be focused much more specifically on professional well-being. Okay, and this is not to take away from how our personal lives also impact us at work. So I define professional well-being as our capacity to keep showing up with the things that matter, the integrity, the compassion, and the energy in what we know to not only be high stress work, But inherently, as a mission-driven helping profession, it's also trauma exposed. The trauma exposure is just built in, so to speak, as an occupational hazard. And how do we actually achieve professional well-being? And this is where I think there's a slight difference between, this is where the framing matters. We cannot expect people to simply take care of their own inner landscape and be okay. Because when we are in workplace settings, the teams we work in, the systems we work in, also very much impact our well-being and our mental health. When we're talking about mission-driven work and helping professions like veterinary medicine, because the stress and trauma exposure is inherently built into the work, it is not enough to give people coping strategies to move through. We actually need to start to change the conditions within our workplace settings that could be impacting people's mental health. And so this is the frame that I often use, and I'll tell you, this frame is constantly evolving. I'm sure many of us are familiar or have at least heard the language of compassion fatigue. I've moved away from that language for a very specific reason. Not that it doesn't occur or that it doesn't exist, but when you actually look at the term compassion, compassion is not just the caring for the suffering or wanting to tend to the suffering and pain of others. Compassion involves acting on that care. And if compassion was totally depleted in veterinary medicine, everyone would stop acting. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing that despite the working conditions, despite the stress, despite the pressures, people are showing up stronger than ever. That compassion is still there. What I see in the folks that I support, and I don't know if this lands with your experience, is more what I call chronic overload. And the way that I define that is when the demands and expectations of the work consistently exceed what we can just do as human beings. So when we're talking about capacity, we're not just talking about physical. We're talking about mentally, emotionally, socially. And here's the kicker. Yeah, some work is really, really hard, but I'm not sure that we have figured out a system to allow folks to actively recover from sort of the hits on the nervous system that are happening consistently every day. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of beautiful things in our profession, and I don't want to leave this on a negative note. So just bear with me for a moment. I often see these 4 contributing factors leading to chronic overload. And it's terminology many of us have heard, yeah? Burnout. This is when the working conditions just make it hard to sort of keep up. The secondary traumatic stress is when we are exposed to the pain and suffering of others that can, over time, without built-in support and recovery, can overwhelm our capacity to cope. Moral distress, which we know is getting a lot more attention in veterinary medicine, is when we are in positions where we can't act in alignment with our values. And so there's like what we often call this like incongruence. Morally, we feel stretched. And of course, cumulative grief, which can show up in a number of different ways. So when you put these 4 factors together, I think what's so important just to pay attention to is that these are built into the job. And so if that's the case, focusing on mental health alone is often not enough. We need to be supporting people's mental health and also establishing conditions to promote professional well-being. And so why I wanted to pause on this for a moment is to not make it feel heavy, because I think when we can get the framing a little bit more accurate, we can develop strategies that are much more appropriate. And I think a lot of people and organizations are trying to do some really good work, and I have no doubt that it's helping. But sometimes it can sort of feel like we're throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping that something will shift. And I think we as a profession really need to figure out a deeper strategy for addressing not just mental health, but professional well-being. Now, what's the flip side of this? Because we also know not everyone is totally depleted. And the more people I speak with, and I'm actually starting to see some practices getting it more right. And I think that gives us a lot of hope. Not meant to be all-encompassing. This is just where I'm at in my understanding right now. What are the factors that sustain professional well-being? Well, like I've been saying for the last few minutes, we got to change our systems and our processes with the way that we work to be able to create these manageable working conditions, and so that folks have the opportunity for active recovery physically, emotionally, cognitively, right? Because I think one of the unique factors of this work as an RVT is you are expending every type of energy there is: physical, mental, emotional, social, interpersonal, right? So building the systems to support capacity. We also know that alignment is incredibly important to contribute to work satisfaction. In mission driven and helping professions, whether we realize it or not, we're coming in with a set of values, belief systems, those things that guide why we do this work and how we show up in our work. And it is so important that not only are we working in our practice with that alignment, but we are working within hospitals and clinics that are also aligned. This is where we're seeing a lot more come up around things like access to care, contextualized care, spectrum of care, because what we're trying to do is create that greater alignment. We also know that connection in high stress work is just critical, because chronic stress, survival stress, and exposure to trauma that can remain unresolved can lead us to disconnecting from ourselves and also disconnecting from those around us. And so connection is the way back home. And how do we do that? Things you've heard before. We've got to figure out how to keep fostering psychological safety within our team. We got to keep working at addressing ruptures in our relationships through things like conflict repair. And if I was to pick one thing, this one is the thing that I see over and over and over again. We need to be creating systems that do not prevent people from having the impact that they desire to come in with, because we know that this is heart-led work. And so I think we are figuring out pieces of this. And I also believe that we've made significant strides. And so just holding space right now for the duality, that two things can exist at the same time. We still have some challenges, but we've also made tremendous progress over the years, even though it doesn't always feel that way. Because I think sometimes when you're in the thick of it, especially when your energy is low and we're fatigued and we're experiencing chronic overload, it's hard to sometimes zoom out and see that bigger picture, and I get it. All this depicts is a little bit of my timeline, which I'm going to keep super, super brief. This hospital right here represents my first hospital job in 2008, when I was practicing as a social worker in an animal hospital, and I had no idea that this thing called veterinary social work existed. I was just intuitively doing it. And I was hired as a grief counselor to support clients through their pet's end of life journey and to support their grief journey afterwards. And so I look back and I think in 2008, wow, I got certified as a compassion fatigue specialist back then. And I couldn't get anyone to have a conversation with me about compassion fatigue in 2008. And then fast forward to this past OAVT's conference, and this is just meant to be symbolic. Almost every veterinary conference now has a well-being track. That's progress. We're talking about this in ways that we weren't able to before. And while this third picture does not depict the norm, I hope it does one day. And this depicts the fact that I am hired by organizations to work on site, to provide crisis support, critical incident stress debriefs, and ongoing well-being support to help to mitigate some of the workplace exposure. And so when I zoom out and I look at my career, specifically from 2004 onwards, I see the growth, but it's so hard when you're in it. And finally, just a few more tangibles before we turn it over. While we may not be exactly where we want to be, let's not lose sight of the fact that we now have increased access to mental health resources that probably were unheard of, maybe even 5-10 years ago. More of our practices have access to employee family assistance programs. We're slowly very slowly starting to see increased workplace benefits for mental health providers. When we look at groups like the Veterinary Hope Foundation or NOMV, we know that more peer-to-peer support is there. You have Natasha and myself on today, both of whom are in Ontario, are veterinary social workers, and we're not the only ones. I remember back in 2008, I didn't know another soul in Canada that was doing it. And now we have this whole network. We're growing. And as we're going to talk about later, OAVT member support. The second point, I want to add a bit of context here. In a 2024 Merck study, it showed that 3/4 of veterinary professionals express personal satisfaction with their careers. And I remember having a strong reaction to that. I'm like, that's not what I'm seeing, until I remembered the concept of duality, that multiple things can exist at the same time. And this is what I see over and over again. Yes, things can be challenging. Yes, the chronic overload exists. And yet there are still so many elements of this work that are deeply, deeply satisfying and rewarding. We're seeing greater mentorship and peer support initiatives, groups like MentorVet, Possibilities VetMed, really trying to support the transition of early career veterinarians and veterinary professionals. We're seeing a greater focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. And again, like 10 years ago, that would have been unheard of. I mentioned the Wellbeing Conference tracks and the growth of veterinary social work. So while we still have a ways to go, I'm hoping that tonight can also be a moment where we pause and celebrate how much work we've done to get to where we are. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shauna.
Thank you so much, Angie, for sharing your observations with us. It's definitely encouraging to see the progress that's been made in the industry over the past several years to support those individuals working in animal health. But as you mentioned, there's still more work that can be done. So now I would like to introduce Amelia Caniff. Amelia's sister is Brittany Gaw, who is a passionate and skilled RVT, who is also a member of our association. Amelia has been kind enough to share a bit of her sister's special story with us and shed some light on how Brittany's struggles with mental health touched her whole family. She has also put a lovely tribute video together to honor her sister, which she'll share with us as well. So please join me in welcoming Amelia.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I have my Brit t-shirt on. Had these made up after she passed. And if you can see, there's a little halo right beside me. So she's definitely with us tonight. Again, hi to everybody. I'm ready for tonight. Thank you all for being here to honor my little sister, Brit, and to hear some of her stories about her life and times as an animal lover and as a dedicated and loving vet tech for only a few short but fulfilling 4 years. And shout out to our mom, Hillary, who is here tonight watching. What a beautiful early Mother's Day gift to have her youngest be honored tonight and to be remembered in such a special way. Little Brittany, born Brittany Page Gaw in Toronto, Ontario, October 20th, 1988. She was a beam of light straight out the gates. I'm not just being completely biased. She was actually the cutest kid I've ever seen in my life. She was so adorable, curious, and very playful. Britt was the youngest of 3 girls, sisters to Ashley and me, daughter of Hillary and Tom, and we all grew up in Orangeville, Ontario for most of our lives. Some pictures of her as a kid with all these lovely animals here. She was fearless. Ever since Brittany was little, she wanted to spend all of her time with animals. She would pick them up no matter what they were, if they were a dog or a snake. She would squeeze them so tight and never, ever want to let them go. We knew there was a passion there from the start and saw how happy she was around them, especially dogs. One time she even walked by our rabbit Pepper's cage, stuck her face in so close to him, and he latched on teeth first onto her nose. She ran screaming with Pepper still attached to her, but that did not stop her. She just kept doing her thing, loving animals no matter what, and getting as close as she possibly could. To me, this showed deep commitment. Some of Britt's favorite things are listed here. Music was a huge part of her life. She learned piano as a young girl, but stopped for many years during teenage years. And as an adult, she retaught herself, as well as taught herself how to play the guitar, the violin, and the auto harp, which I had never heard of until she pulled it out one day. She was also a beautiful singer as well, so beyond musically talented. And I know how much joy it brought her playing for others. She spent many years up in Tobermory, Ontario, which was her favorite place on earth. I felt she was at peace whenever she was way up north. She loved her family deeply, her parents, her sisters, her stepfather, uncles, aunts, everyone. She did everything she possibly could to get us together as much as possible. In 2011, life tragically changed for us as a family. Our dad shot himself in the woods near London, Ontario. He was so depressed for so many years and put a lot of pressure on Britt leading up to his passing, as they lived together for a while, almost up until he passed away. It broke all of our hearts, but I felt it was different for Brittany. She kept so much pain to herself. She had a mental breakdown right before and right after his passing, and was also hospitalized and placed on medication after being diagnosed bipolar. It made her feel terrible being on these medications, and she refused to continue taking them. She fought her way through this challenging time in her life, and she did it on her own terms. She is a true survivor. As time went on, Britt seemed to be healed from her depression. She was so happy again, back to her usual self, and we all just believed she magically got better. She decided one day to go back to school and to become a veterinarian technician. She chose a college way up north, Northern College in Haileybury, Ontario, and in 2017, she graduated valedictorian of her class. Talk about achievements. We're all so proud. And as the rest of us family members breathed a sigh of relief that Britt was doing so well. She loved the outdoors, especially moose, seen here in this photo. She spent her third year specializing up at a college in the Yukon, working with animals in a wildlife rehabilitation program. She also loved foxes, which you can see here. She's feeding a fox down on the right there. I also wanted to share how much she adored her job. Once she graduated from college, she started at Manitou Animal Hospital in Kitchener, Ontario. She made so many friends there. She followed her dreams, worked her butt off, and became a hero to so many people. She worked tirelessly and all throughout COVID every single day, dedicated every single second to helping people and their beloved pets. Soon after her career started, she rescued an elderly dog, a black lab named Abe, who was found almost frozen to death, tied to a pole in the middle of winter. She used to say, "He rescued me as much as I rescued him." And I didn't fully realize the power in what she meant by that until Abe passed away. Sadly, June of 2022, Brittany lost her baby. At the same time, only a few weeks prior to Abe passing, she had moved to a new home in Oro-Medonte, started a new job at an animal hospital in Aurelia, which was not going very well, and felt extremely stressed out. She was also financially struggling, and now the loss of her baby, all these stressors were piling up. She complained she hadn't slept in months. She was lonely and mentally not feeling well. So one day she went to the hospital after having suicidal thoughts and was turned away about half an hour later and given 2 different antidepressants, which made her feel even worse. It was not only the challenges at work, it was too much all at once, too much change. There were many factors that compounded, and led to pain and suffering. Yes, the job itself was very stressful, but it wasn't the only thing that led to Britt's passing. The loss of Dad had a huge impact alone. A child of a parent who has taken their lives has a 33% higher chance of suicide themselves later in life. Brittany tried every single day since Abe passed to be happy, to find joy, to find purpose. It was only a few months since Abe passed away that Brittany just couldn't do it anymore. She was ready for her next journey and to rest peacefully. She wandered into the forest and asphyxiated herself with a rope until she passed out. She was exhausted mentally and physically, and I believe died of a broken heart. And it gives all of us, or some of us, some sort of peace knowing that Britt now spends her time helping animals who have passed away over a rainbow bridge. She welcomes them with open arms and is reunited with her loved ones that she lost. I truly believe that she is happy and can rest peacefully. Britt passed away tragically October 11th, 2022. We will now go to the video that it's very special. It was actually created using Brittany's own videos and photos that were on her phone, documenting some great moments and memories as she was a vet tech and also with loved ones. We are so proud of you, Britt, and we'll never forget how much you made the world a better place, one paw at a time. I am in no means a mental health care professional, but if anybody wants to reach out to me directly about anything on their minds, please do. Or if you want to hear more about Britt's story, my information is listed here. If I can say anything at all, just don't keep your sadness inside and share it with whoever you are comfortable with. And it could help just by sharing about what's going on in your life. I've had my battles with depression and overcoming personal struggles, and it would make me so happy to spend time with you and just listen. So thank you so much for having me.
Amelia, that was a beautiful tribute to your sister and a fellow RVT member. I'm so sorry that the music was not working. I don't know, those technical gremlins were working their magic. Oh,
I think it was Britt just messing with stuff.
Maybe it was. Maybe.
It's fine.
Brittany. Oh, but from what you shared tonight, I can see what a special person she was and how many human and animal lives that she touched. So thank you so much for sharing her story and also for what you're doing to make others feel less alone with their own struggles. So with that, I'd now finally like to introduce Stacy Murphy. Stacy is an RVT and an OVT member who is Brittany's colleague, but also her very close friend. It was actually Stacy who reached out to me wanting to share Brittany's story. And after many, many discussions about the best way to do this, here we are tonight at tonight's presentation, trying to spread a message of hope to others. So after facing her own challenges following Brittany's passing, supporting others in the veterinary sector with their mental health has become so important to Stacy that she is in the process of completing her veterinary human support certificate through the University of Tennessee. So let's all welcome Stacy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's really amazing that we get to honor Brittany. I do think she is here tonight with us. This morning when I got to work, I opened up my computer and on Facebook, the first thing that popped up in my feed was the picture that you can see now, which is of Brittany and Abe. And it came up as just like a memory that I had posted in the past. And so right from the get-go, I knew this was going to be really special. And I could feel that she was definitely here with us. So let me start by saying I'm going to cry. I'm a crier. This is a very important subject to me. It's very important to me that we're finding a way to honor Brittany or finding another way to honor Brittany. Brittany was very loved. She is very loved. She had amazing friends. She was talented and passionate about her career. She had a loving partner. She had beautiful pets. Those are things that I'll always celebrate about her. And so thank you for taking the time to honor her by allowing us to share her memories. I met Britt through our workplace, Manitou Animal Hospital, and right from the beginning, we were immediate friends. We bonded instantly when I noticed her tattoo of the John Lennon self-portrait, and it just went from there. We shared a love of music. That first few months that we knew each other, we ended up at the same concert a few times, even though we did not know each other when we purchased the tickets. And in one case, we were actually just like one row apart at the same concert. Just a funny story about the auto harp. Brittany is the only other person I've ever met who knew what an auto harp was. And when I said that I too had always wanted to learn how to play it, she said, "Do you want my spare one?" And I was like, how is this that you know what an auto harp is, you play it yourself, you happen to have an extra one? So it was just things like that that always seemed to connect with me and Brittany. Brittany quickly became one of my close friends when we realized we shared a lot of the same mental health background, a lot of the same challenges, even some of the same medications. We could talk really freely to one another about basically anything. We started hanging out outside of work, often meeting up at her house on Sunday mornings to drink far too much coffee, listen to music, and go for walks in the nearby park with her dogs, Bentley, and her heart dog, Abe. She is one of the few people I have met that appreciate a winter walk like I do. If you pop to the next slide, you'll just see some pictures of walks that we took together. She actually lived beside a really lovely park, so we walked there a lot. She encouraged me to be the best version of myself. When I told her I wanted to try yoga, she had me over for yoga sessions. When I told her I wanted to lose weight, she cooked me healthy meals. She was a phenomenal cook, a phenomenal baker, and she shared many recipes with me. When I needed someone to talk to, she was there. Brittany was a phenomenal RVT. Every day she went the extra mile for her clients and patients. When my own cat Annie, who you see here, needed to be euthanized because of a rapidly growing liver tumor, she not only hugged me when I cried, but she played videos of birds for Annie to watch while the sedation kicked in. She made sure that my girl had a very beautiful send-off, and she didn't just save those moments of caring for her friends. She gave them to everyone like wildflowers. She was trained in wildlife rehab, and she often took orphan babies overnight to administer fluids, medication, and bottle feed them while we tried to find wildlife rehabbers. One day, without a hint of hesitation, she offered to drive an injured bunny to a wildlife rehabber over an hour away when it had been brought into the clinic at the end of her shift. We grabbed dinner to go, started the drive, music playing on the radio, and Britt, like she always does, was the car DJ the entire ride. One of my favorite memories of Britt is coincidentally probably one of the sadder moments of her life. When her dog Abe needed to be euthanized, she returned to our clinic, Manitou, to say goodbye, having just moved up north with her partner a few months before. Britt did everything for Abe: surgery, rehab, physio, supplement, medications, and she wanted to make sure he had the most beautiful send off. I just remember sitting in a circle around Abe and Britt, her mom and sisters, and partner by their side, as well as the entire clinic team, as she played music for Abe to fall asleep to. It was incredibly a beautiful send-off. The send-off she gave her best boy was just beautiful. It was sad to say goodbye to Abe, but she gave him the most honorable goodbye. We should all be so lucky to know the love that Abe and Britt have for one another. Last year, when I was at the clinic for an emergency appointment for my dog Nikki, and I was contemplating saying goodbye to him or hanging on a little longer, I thought of that moment with Abe. I thought to myself that I should play some music, and the first song that came up on the shuffle was Into the Mystic by Van Morrison, which you actually just heard in the video. I have always associated this song with Britt, and it was one of the songs she played for Abe as she said goodbye. In that moment, I knew that both Britt and Abe would be waiting on the other side for Nikki, and I felt an enormous amount of peace in saying goodbye that day. There's my little Nikki. Britt's death shook me to my core. I had spoken to her the day before she died, and she had told me that she was feeling better and was optimistic about returning to work that week. I'm forever grateful that my last words to her were words of support. She has given me so much love and support in the time that I knew her, and it has only become more apparent as the years pass what an impact she had both on the lives of her friends and family and the lives of her patients. I was extremely fortunate to be working at a clinic that was very supportive of me following Brittany's death, Mitchell Animal Hospital. Without hesitation or question, they gave me the rest of the week off. They sent me skip the dishes, gift certificates so that I could order food instead of cooking, and they checked in on me frequently. I had worked there at that time for a month, and still these people were basically strangers, and yet they found so much grace and compassion for me in probably one of the most difficult times of my life. I can say without hesitation, vet med people are very good people, and I can't speak highly enough of my work family. Excuse me. Being that I have depression and have at times dealt with suicidal ideation, I knew that I needed to take good care of myself following her death. I'm very lucky to not only have a very supportive work family, but I am also surrounded by a supportive mother and great friends. The most important thing I can say is to talk about your mental health. Talk to professionals, talk to other vet med staff who understand, talk to friends. Don't suffer in silence. So on the slide, you'll see some of the resources that I accessed in the time after she died. The first two are kind of regional to the Waterloo region, so that's the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council and Here 24/7. There's also the Suicide Crisis Helpline, which I called not because I was feeling having suicidal ideation, but that just I was having difficulty dealing with her death. And they were actually really lovely and helped me find ways to memorialize her. One of which was creating a music playlist that I could listen to that would remind me of her, that I still listen to basically every week now. There's also the OAVT wellness resources that are on the OAVT website. Some of the services that I accessed after Brittany's death, and additionally following the suicide of my cousin a short 9 months later, included an employee assistance program through my employer that my manager encouraged me to use after a particularly rough week. I already had a regular therapist, but she recommended using our EAP for some additional mental health concerns that had come up. Being that I have mental health issues, I also made sure to stay in close contact with my psychiatrist, who helped me adjust medications as needed and help put things into perspective at times. I struggled a lot with just, is this depression or is this, just a normal reaction to a very sad event? With my therapist, we created lists of things that help me when I'm in a bad headspace, and it was really important to do those things when I was in a good headspace. And we called this my mental health toolbox. It's important to make your toolbox ahead of time so that when you're struggling, you don't have to put in a lot of effort to do anything. The list included people I could call and why they would want to support me. Depression lies and tells you no one cares, so it's important to have the reasons. Resources I could contact, such as Here 24/7 and 988, the suicide prevention hotline, which you can call or text. Um, I contacted the prevention hotline not when I was struggling, but rather when I was just not when I was struggling with my own suicidal ideation, but when I was struggling with Brit. The toolbox also contains a list of things I could do around the house that would make me feel better. For example, maybe I'm too depressed to shower today, but could I wash my face or could I brush my teeth? Simple one-step things that I could do to support myself should I find myself in a rut. I also attended a support group through the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council, in which I met other people who had been through a similar experience and were all at different stages in their grieving process. Through this support group, I met the family of a young woman who was an artist, and they shared some of her art with the group. And immediately I saw Brit in her paintings. The family was kind enough to gift me a copy of her art, which very proudly hangs on my wall today. So the picture on the left is a picture that Britt took while she was in the Yukon and sent to me, telling me how much she loved it there and how beautiful it was. Um, and on the right is Jackie's painting, and I think it's pretty obvious why I could see the connection between the two pictures. I make sure to attend basically any continuing education that I can find that involves the veterinary field and mental health. The struggles that we face as veterinary professionals are unique and complex, so I think that it's important to not only share knowledge about mental health and the veterinary field, but also that we find new and practical tips for managing the job stressors we are exposed to so that we are better able to manage our own mental health. I've completed the trauma-informed care modules by the Vancouver Humane Society, which are free, which I believe has helped me approach clients and coworkers with a greater level of empathy while acknowledging that we all have been exposed to our own unique traumas in our lives and that these experiences shape us. Knowledge empowers us and helps to destigmatize mental health issues. Further to that, as it was mentioned, I'm currently completing the Veterinary Human Support Certification Program through the University of Tennessee in order to find ways to help both clients and peers with the struggles that we face every day in this field. Some of the courses involved in this program are emotional CPR, which I would highly recommend to anyone. It's an amazing course and it's incredibly insightful. Other courses are compassion fatigue management and animal related bereavement. I decided to pursue this training because I felt that it might help me help others someday. And I was wanting to do this because of Brittany. I thought if there was someone else that could help with insight into the struggles that RVTs feel, it could maybe help someone like me or help someone like Britt. Most importantly, like Britt was, I am surrounded by wonderful friends and family. My friends held space for me when I needed to talk or cry. They listened without trying to solve things, and they gave me hugs when I was sad. I fully expected the 1 year anniversary of her passing to be a very emotional week, but my friends planned a week-long cottage trip to Tobermory, one of Britt's favorite places. We hiked to the grotto, which you see in the picture here. We had campfires and toasted to Brittany. We sang songs and we celebrated her life. It fills my heart with joy to think back on that week and how my friends helped me turn something sad into something beautiful. Britt would have loved it. And I should say that one of the people on that trip had never met Brittany. They only knew about her through me. Um, and the other person, I think she's on the call today, is my good friend Mandy, who knew Britt because she used to come to the clinic a lot with her dog. And even just this morning, Mandy messaged me and said, "You know what? I know it's going to be a hard day today. Grab yourself a Starbucks." And so I went and I got Britt's favorite drink, which is a cinnamon dolce latte. And so now I have that. I drank it just before we got on here. So those friends continue to support me day in and day out. So thank you, Mandy, if you're here. My mother also helps me every single day. She allows me to cry when a silly meme pops up that I would have loved to share with Britt, which now makes me cry. She's been my biggest support through all of my mental health concerns, not just as I grieve losing Britt, but just everything in life in general. And she's also here today, I think. So this is one of the campfire photos from Tobermory. Last thing I'll say is this. Be sure to show gratitude to those that support you in trying times and in good times. Relationships ebb and flow, and while you may be suffering now, that won't always be the case. So make sure you tell your people how much you appreciate them. Don't be so lost in the what ifs that you forget to live. Britt always wanted to go camping in Tobermory with me, but I always shied away from it because of some health issues I was embarrassed about, and now we'll never get to do that. I literally don't have a single picture with Britt, despite her always having her phone out. She was always taking pictures because I was self-conscious and she was lovely enough to respect that. But it makes me really sad now. Sing the songs, take the hikes, show gratitude, and take pictures. Show love with reckless abandon. You'll never be sorry for being too loving. Take care of yourself and take care of people who show you love and compassion. The memory of Britt will live on in my heart for as long as I live, and I'll never be sad about that. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Oh, Stacey, thank you so much for being so honest with us tonight about your own struggles and for doing such a beautiful job honoring your friend and your colleague. I do have a feeling that Brittany and Abe are smiling down on all of us tonight. Okay, so now I just wanted to quickly go over some resources that as your member association that we do offer to our members, of which we have more than 5,000 of you across the province. So, and as your member association, we do recognize that mental health, has had and continues to have a real impact on our members. And that's why we've made an effort to have a wide variety of resources and supports readily available for members who may be looking for help for themselves or their family members. We want to make it easy for members to get the support they need when they need it. So we did create a wellness resources page, which Stacy mentioned earlier. It's on our website, and it provides information on a variety of provincial and national organizations and programs. And it also has some veterinary specific resources. I'd also like to give Stacy a little shout out here because she was very instrumental in helping us compile all of these resources to put on our website for our members. One of the resources you'll find on our wellness page is Together All. This is something we've recently introduced to our members. It's a free online peer support platform, and it allows our members to connect anonymously with others in the veterinary community. It also offers users a variety of self-directed courses and assessments. It's easy to set up your account with Together All. Simply look for Together All on the Wellness Resources page on our website. And click on either the Learn More or Join Now buttons on the poster. So easy peasy. Perhaps the most comprehensive resource that we offer to members of the OAVT is our Member Assistance Program provided by Dialogue. And it is available to RVTs, to retired RVTs, and to pending members of our association. It's a free resource that connects members with mental health therapists, along with a variety of other professionals. One of the things that makes this program different from other employee assistance programs is that it's delivered virtually, so either online or over the phone, which makes it very simple to speak with someone. But the best part is that members can access mental health support until their issue is resolved. So this program, unlike others, it doesn't put a cap on how many mental health sessions you're entitled to. So your therapist will speak with you as long as needed until, as I said, until your issue is resolved. As mentioned on the slide, you can access information about the program by going to the resource library in your member portal. Once you've set up your account with Dialogue, you can then reach out and request support. Their response time is very fast. And the care coordinators that will work with you, they really do a great job of ensuring that they connect you with a therapist that would help your specific situation. So they put a lot of care and effort into that. It is truly a great program, and we've received a ton of positive feedback from members who've used it. This next resource on the slide here, I'm going to ask Angie to provide you with a little more information about this particular resource.
Thank you, Shauna. So for those of you that might be interested in accessing training around suicide prevention training, there are a lot of different suicide prevention trainings that exist. I think a really helpful and good starting point is the QPR. Suicide prevention training, and the QPR stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. And it is actually available for free. If you go through, I think Shauna will probably we'll have a link to the website at some point, but it is provided for free at no cost through the AVMA. And so you're able to just kind of, once you get the link, log onto it, create a quick account. And the QPR training, I've gone through it myself, is not incredibly lengthy. There are different versions of it, but the one that the AVMA provides is pretty accessible. It doesn't take too long, but still very powerful. And so it will help you to recognize the warning signs and give really practical tips on how to start conversations, because I think sometimes that can be a hard piece. Perhaps it's with friends, with family members, with even colleagues or clients. And this can come really, really handy just to, Stacey, I'm actually going to quote you. You said, knowledge empowers us. And that's what I view this resource to also be. Sometimes we just don't know what to say, and it gives some really helpful tips. And ultimately one of the purposes here is to guide people towards appropriate support. But again, giving you some of the language on how to do that.
Perfect. Thanks, Angie. Okay, so we do have a little bit of time, 1 minute, but we might go over a smidge, to answer any questions. I see we do have one question in the Q&A. It's a question, also a statement. Angie, I don't know, I guess, would you be able to address the comment that we have in the Q&A? I think there are a
I
lot
have
of
a
our
hard
members
time.
that are feeling the same thing.
Do you mind reading it? Because my eyesight is just
Oh,
not
of
so great.
course
I
I
can't
will.
read
Yeah,
this whole font.
of
Thanks.
course. Yes. So it says, I thought I'd found my unicorn clinic, but unfortunately found that my thoughts and feelings were not supported or respected. There is some issue with staffing in veterinary medicine that locums are often relied upon, and as employers are so afraid of losing them, a cohesive open team is no longer seems to be the norm. It is just shut up and cope. I had to leave that workplace after a very traumatic event and am now in therapy. Will this ever change?
For the person that shared this, thank you for stepping in and saying what you did. And there's definitely a few layers to it, which I don't think I'll be able to do justice to all the layers. But the three words that sort of stood out for me from that, not to minimize any other parts, was like that cohesive, open team. I wish I had like one easy thing to say is, let's just do this and everything will be fine. I do believe, and again, this is just my take, that we haven't factored in how the nature of the work, and some of it we've created, the pace, the lack of active recovery time, the pressures, the workflows. We haven't designed our work to be cohesive, to create a cohesive team. Because what are the conditions that requires, right? I mean, we could sit here all night and talk about the psychological safety, the being able to have these hard conversations. The last question at the end is, will it ever end? I do believe it's changing. And I know that doesn't help in this moment for people that are going through it. I think we need much more of a coordinated response. We now see what's happening. We see how the stress and the trauma exposure is impacting every individual person within the team. And then you get all these people together in a team environment, and you see how communication starts to break down. A lot of the behaviors that we see in the uncohesive open team or lack of open teams is often like our nervous systems at play, showing up with behaviors that are not actually who we are. Right. So when we see the blaming, when we see the quote unquote toxicity, that's not inherent to who we are. And I think when we can start to peel back the layers and get back to the humanness and start treating our bodies and our hearts and the pace of the work, like, I will stand here and say, I think we need a massive overhaul. I'll be so blunt as to say the system is not working. And so we're going to keep circling in it until we get to that root of, and I'm going to come back to something I said earlier, we have to design our workplaces with the occupational hazards in mind, full stop. Do I believe it's possible? Yeah. I can tell you from my experience, I'm working with practices right now where we're getting to the root. So I believe it's possible. I just don't think we have enough human power to do it en masse yet. Will that shift? I sure hope so.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angie. So I guess this brings us to the end of tonight's presentation. We hope you found it worthwhile and helpful, and I do encourage you to check out the resources on our website. As Angie mentioned, I will be sending a quick follow-up email to everyone who participated in tonight's webinar, so expect to see an email from me in your inbox. I also hope you realize that in addition to the resources we shared with you tonight, there are individuals, both professionally and personally, who are available to offer support if you need it. You are not alone, and you don't need to be ashamed to reach out. To finish, I'd like to invite everyone to do something supportive for themselves after signing off from the presentation tonight. Maybe have a bubble bath, something like that. Angie, would you give us some suggestions on what we might consider doing to
I would say whatever brings
support ourselves?
Just a little bit of gentleness. Try not to jump into anything super taxing right after this. Maybe just take some moments to curl up with your pet, get a hug from somebody you love, spend a bit of quiet time or loud time, whatever serves you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And as I said, I will be reaching out in the next day or so. So take care, everyone.